today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
the interplay of finance, emotional needs, and sex. Having money in and of itself does not necessarily mean that you're going to have more sex and more children. And once there's trust, that is when people become vulnerable. And when there's vulnerability, there is intimacy. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship, and I am your host, Rich Heller, and we're talking today about the complex relationship between money, sex, and emotional needs in relationships. You would think that this is a really simple topic. You would think more money equals more sex, and less money, maybe less sex. But it's actually not true that it works that way, though it is true that during the Great Depression, when there was a massive economic downturn, birth rates went down, many couples passed up on having kids or had less kids. And it is also true that the baby boomer generation was spawned during a time of great economic growth in this country. The same is not necessarily true for our relationships. Yes, we need to feel positive about what's the financial future to have children, but having money in and of itself does not necessarily mean that you're going to have more sex and more children. And let's be clear, a lot of times sex doesn't mean having children. It's just about pleasure. If we really want to understand the relationship between the dynamics of money and sex and the emotional state of the relationship, we need to understand first, what are the conditions that are conducive to emotional intimacy? Second, what are the dynamics of money for men and the dynamics of money for third? And third, how does financial stress and financial success influence these dynamics? So first, let's talk about intimacy. It has been said that intimacy is built on basic principles. The core principle is honesty, honest communication. Not that kind of honesty where you're beating someone over the head with your righteousness, but authentic honesty where you're sharing your feelings honestly, without assigning responsibility or blame to the other person. With that basis for honesty, you start to create safety. So when there's safety, for a certain period of time, then people decide that they're going to trust. And once there's trust, that is when people become vulnerable. And when there's vulnerability, there is intimacy. All right. And intimacy is a really tricky word. Intimacy means that some people say intimacy means into me, you see, is intimacy. Some people say that intimacy, it means you can stand in front of each other, naked, warts, farts, and all, and still accept and love one another. Intimacy ultimately means that you not only know what it's like to walk in the other person's shoes, but you're walking in them. And I believe that when we get married, many of us get married because in that in-love phase, we experience that intimacy and we want to have more of that. We want to have that for the rest of our lives. And then life happens. Children happen. When children happen, financial concerns come up. All right, now let's throw another wrench into the mix. Men, the more stressed men get, the more they want physical release in order to feel safe and intimate. So men seek sex as a form of emotional and physical release, and afterwards they feel close and safe. Women, for the most part, we're speaking in broad brush strokes here, want to feel safe first before they'll be physically intimate. They want to feel, so men and women come at sex from opposite angles. What that means is when things are stressful in the family, the man may want to be physically intimate more, and the woman may want to be physically intimate less, which puts them in diametric opposition in terms of physical need and physical expression. All right. Now, that is not to say that women don't have a physical need for sex. What I'm talking about is intimate sex. What I'm talking about here is closeness. All right. Now, here's another piece of the puzzle. Men have a relationship with money that's based around security. It's based around a need to provide. It's based around ensuring the future for the family to some extent. And women tend to have a relationship around money that's about ensuring nurturing, a warm, nurturing, and caring environment. And again, these are broad generalizations. It's not that men can't or don't want to provide a warm, nurturing environment. And it's not that women can't be forward thinking. In fact, in this podcast, we have argued many times that it is vital that women be involved in the future financial planning of the relationship. And it is vital that men be involved in nurturing and caring for the children. What I'm saying is that in relationship to money, women tend to be more focused in one area and men tend to be focused in another. And the perfect harmony financially is when both of these concerns are understood and expressed on both sides. And the perfect partnership is when each partner allows the other to lead in the area that they have the most strength. So I'm not saying that these areas are completely separate. What I'm saying is there's a tendency and there's overlap, right? If we were doing a Venn diagram, there'd be overlap in the middle. This complicates the relationship between sex and money because men have a different take on finances than women for the most part. Men have different sexual needs than, they express their sexual needs from a different emotional background than women do. And so the areas, when we start talking about families, finance, and intimacy, the area of overlap may become less and less over time. So what happens when there's financial stress? What happens when there's financial stress in any way? It's going to impact the sexual dynamic. If women feel that there's stress in any way, their sense of safety is reduced. If their sense of safety is reduced, their desire for intimacy is reduced, and they're less likely to give in. If men feel that stressed in any way, their sense of safety is reduced, and they're going to try and recapture that sense of safety by having a sexual relationship with their wife, which boosts their fragile male egos and helps them to feel as though they're cared for, wanted, and loved. Stressors of any kind can impact this relationship, with an exception. All right, the exception is how those stressors are met. When stressors are met with equanimity, when stressors are openly discussed and aired out, when there is unified sense of purpose, stressors can actually boost intimacy in the relationship. What that means is there can be plenty of money in a marriage and still very low intimacy. In fact, I've had a ton of clients where both partners were great earners, but they experienced both sides a lot of sexual frustration, right? It wasn't so much that the woman didn't want to have sex. They wanted to have sex, but they wouldn't allow themselves to because they didn't feel safe. They didn't feel respected. They didn't feel honored, right? And the men, because they weren't having the kind of intimacy that they really hoped they would have, felt disrespected, not understood, and as if their contributions were not being valued. And they're like, this is in a high earning situation. I've also had couples where there was very low earnings, but they were very much on the same page. One of them might lose their job. And there's one person who's the prime wage earner, and they're just barely getting by. But as long as they have clarity of vision, of a shared vision, and they're acting within that shared vision, and they're acting and living in hope, the intimacy, their sex life would actually go up. And so what makes the difference in money, sex, and the emotional state of the relationship isn't so much the money, it's how much are you on the same page. Being on the same page is complicated. It's complicated because you both got different money maps. You both grew up in different families with different relationships with money. You maybe grew up in different cultures. You both grew up, you might be in reaction to the lessons about money that you were given. You might have grown up in a family and you might be rejecting what they believe about money, or you might have grown up in a family and really embracing it. But the fact of the matter is, it's very rare that strong partnerships have exactly the same take on money. In fact, the growth in the partnership comes from getting on the same page. And I want you to know, I'm not just speaking as a professional here, I am speaking from personal experience. I will share a personal story. My wife and I went to very similar schools. We grew up in the same neighborhood. We didn't just grow up in similar schools. We went to the same college. We went to two schools that were cost the same and were in the same neighborhood, private schools. We grew up within 5 blocks of each other. Both of our families had a history of wealth, all right? And yet we had very different takes on money because her family had continuous wealth and my family didn't, right? I tend to be much more frugal and she tends to be much more free in her spending. And my frugality, by the way, is not based on how much we have. It's an ingrained habit from having lived on food stamps at one period in my life when I was alone. I've got that 10-pound block of American cheese. I never forgot it. She's never had that experience, right? Once you've had the 10-pound block of American cheese, and lived on that for a few weeks because you didn't have any other income for whatever reason, right? That ingrains a perspective on money and how it's to be used, regardless of how you grew up. And so we've got very different angles on this. And through working together, through looking at what is our overall wealth status, what is our conjoined incomes, how much do we have going in, how much do we have going out, do we have money for an emergency? Do we have money put away for our kids' college funds? Do we have money put away for when our metabolisms are less vital and when we are perhaps less productive? Are we putting all these things in place? Once I saw that we had put all these things in place, I was able to loosen up my frugality. And on her side, when she saw that there are times when frugality really is worthwhile, that being frugal in certain areas really can set aside money for things that you want even more, she was able to buy into my perspective. So over time, and with some help, we figured out how to get on the same page about money. And as we got more on the same page about money, we also, in that process, shared more about our personal histories. We shared more about how we grew up. We shared more about what was different, what was the same. We shared more about how far out these dreams were for the things that we wanted to accomplish in our families, the sense of what we felt like would be financial freedom for us and our family. And we got our timelines into alignment. We shared, we did a lot of personal work individually with our own helpers. Releasing old emotions, letting go of beliefs, and then coming back and working together, right? Because we were in the game, because we were individually willing to shift and change, we were able to come together, not in the way that we both thought when we first started having discussions about money, but actually better than I had dreamed when we first started out those negotiations. And so what I'm here to testify to you is that even though you may be in a place right now where you feel like you're not only not having enough sex, but you're on completely separate pages financially. And I'm not talking about that you're poor or rich. I'm talking about different pages financially, your mindsets. I'm telling you that it is possible for you to bring these things together. It is possible for this to be a source of accomplishment, of realignment, of revisioning, and ultimately of greater intimacy, right? And I can testify also that, not that I like to kiss and tell, but the relationship my wife and I have today is more intimate and more caring and the frequency is desirable for us both. We've reached a place of harmony in all the areas that we're talking about today is what I'm telling you, right? And that's pretty freaking cool. And you can have that too. So if you're feeling out of sync financially, or if you feel like your sex life is out of sync, or if you feel like there's emotional disharmony, all right, I'm here to tell you, you can work through those things. You can do the work individually or together. Hey, we help people. Individuals, we help people who are couples to work through stuff like this. So reach out to us for a complimentary call. Go to richinrelationship.com and get on the horn with us. Hey, and if this is helpful, this series on money has been helpful, like us, follow us, share this with other people, share this on your social media platforms. And the next episode is going to be all about the role of money in power dynamics and control in relationships. So we're going to talk all about the power dynamics and control in relationships, right? Kind of what my wife worked through and I work through. There were a lot of issues around power dynamics and control. That's what a lot of that boiled down to in the end. And so we're going to talk about that in the next episode. So stay tuned, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rich in Relationship.